نستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. قال الله تعالى في القرآن المجيد في سورة النساء: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم: يا أيها الذين آمنوا أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول وأولي الأمر منكم فإن تنازعتم في شيء فردوه إلى الله والرسول إن كنتم تؤمنون بالله واليوم الآخر ذلك خير وأحسن تأويلا. صدق الله العظيم. Dear brothers and sisters, today inshallah we'll talk about something of very practical importance, practical value. It will be very short inshallah, but please pay attention. This verse from Surah An-Nisa, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, O you who have attained to faith, pay heed unto God, or obey Allah and obey the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and those from among you who have been entrusted with authority. And if you are at variance over one matter, over any matter, refer it to God and the Apostle. If you truly believe in God and the last day, this is best for you and best in the end. The part of the verse that inshallah I will concentrate on is Ati'ur Rasul. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in this verse and many other verses of the Quran al-Majid to obey Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And in several places, Ati'ullah, obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is also tied with the obedience to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Not only the obedience is emphasized several places, but also in matters that you may have conflict with one another. It may not be directly related to ibadat or directly related to religious matters, but even if you have some sort of conflict with your fellow workers, brothers, family members and whatnot, this particular verse says that you should refer it to the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and refer it to the Prophet. So obviously Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is not among us today, but we refer to the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as to if there were any similar situation that arose and how did Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam resolve the conflict. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says not only be obedient, but also accept him as your judge in the matters of conflict that may arise. And the third thing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also says is that, to be very emphatic about it, he says you really do not believe unless you are obedient to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. فَلَا وَرَبِّكَ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ حَتَّى يُحَكِّمُوكَ فِي مَا شَجَرَ بَيْنَهُمْ ثُمَّ لَا يَجِدُوا فِي أَنفُسِهِمْ حَرَجًا مِمَّا قَضَيْتَ وَيُسَلِّمُوا تَسْلِيمًا. But nay, by the Sustainer, they do not really believe unless they make you, O Prophet, a judge of all on which they disagree among themselves, and then find in their hearts no bar to acceptance of any decision, and give themselves up to in utter self-surrender. So obedience to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is emphasized to the extent that you really are not a believer if you don't obey Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and do not refer your matters to him. And if you do not obey, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also warns, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ati'u Allah wa ati'u Rasul wa la tubtilu a'malakum. O you who have attained to faith, obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and obey the Apostle, and let not your good deeds come to naught. That if you are not obedient to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even the good deeds that you may go to waste, because they will not be accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in many ways Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has emphasized the point of obedience to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Obedience to Allah is very clear. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has communicated His commandments through Quran. And Quran is available anywhere, everywhere in the world, and you read the Quran and you know exactly what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to do. So obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes a little easier. What about obedience to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? He led a whole life among the people that were living at the time. So he lived 63 years of his life. And during his lifetime, he was a family member, he was head of the state, he was a warrior, he was the head of commander-in-chief of the army, and he was a friend, and he was a father. He was all these roles that he performed while he was a person living among the companions of of his companions. So how do we know? And of course, you know, in those styles, and he lived 1400 years ago, and the things that he did at that time, for example, there were no cars available, and he rode a camel. So what all the things that he did when he was living, are all those considered sunnah? Are all those to be followed? How do we make a judgment? How do we differentiate between what he did is to be followed by us, and what he did is really were suitable for his times and are not really applicable to our time? So that's why it is important to understand what is sunnah and what part of sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam constitutes as ibadah, and what part of his sunnah constitutes as sunnah that needs to be followed as a sunnah, and what part need not be followed. So there is a hadith reported in Abu Dawud and At-Tirmidhi. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has emphasized the point that there may be a time when there will be differences created in the practice of the religion. You know, in 1400 years, Islam has survived and Quran has survived. It's a miraculous thing that Quran has survived without any changes. But when it comes to the traditions or ahadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the same type of certainty is not there. There are some ahadith which have been authenticated and determined to be completely authentic through the chain of transmission and so on and so forth. But then there are some other ahadith which may not be that authentic and may not be that accurate. And then of course the whole life itself, as I said, what he might have done may have been applicable to 1400 years ago. Are they still applicable to us? So we need to make a distinction and understand. So in the explanation of this hadith, ulama have said that there are four types of the actions of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam can be categorized into four different categories. One are those acts which are specific to Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. For example, continuous fasting. It's known that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was fasting continuously. Not every day, but he was fasting a lot. When a companion approached him and said that I'm going to fast as much as you do, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, no, don't do it. You do as much as you can, not as much as I am doing it. And second, actions that are related to the culture of his time, such as wearing a turban, unbuttoning the top shirt buttons, keeping long hair, and using a walking stick. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, not because he needed it, but it was the culture at that time that people used to carry big sticks in their hand to be able to ward off any animals or any type of help they could need. Would call it asa, I think, or stick, walking stick. Not that he needed it, but he used to walk with the stick. Are all those considered sunnah? Should we be following those? That's the second category of actions. Third category of actions resulting from spontaneous or haphazard actions. For example, the Prophet ﷺ used to stop at particular places during a journey or take a certain route to a journey. Going from one city to another city, he might have followed one path, and that path does not exist anymore. There's a concrete highway built between one city and the other city. should people still be following the path that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam took at the time. And the fourth category of actions is actions that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam performed intentionally for the purpose of ibadah. Okay, so ulama have said that the last category of actions of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam obviously are ibadah, and they must be performed. So what is an ibadah? That we learn from the traditions of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The test to know whether Prophet's action was an ibadah or not, there are 4 tests to be applied. One is that there is an authentic hadith exists that says that that particular action is an ibadah. And there are several hadiths which describe what particular actions are ibadah. And number 2, or a certain action, if it is done, it will be rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There must be an authentic hadith to say that if you do such and such a thing, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward you. And those type of actions are also counted as ibadah. Or third is that if somebody has performed that action during the lifetime of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam expressed happiness, praised that person for doing such and such an act, then that act also becomes an ibadah, because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam expressed happiness, pleasure at that. And the fourth category is that somebody performs some action, somebody does not perform a particular action, then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam expressed a blame that such and such a person did not perform an action. So not performing an action, if it caused a blame, then that action also becomes an ibadah. So all these are based upon the authentic ahadith. So you need to find authentic ahadith which will validate one of these 4 things in order to consider that as a part of an ibadah. And of course there are other actions which are not ibadah, but they are still sunnah, because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam performed it. Now, for example, as I said, wearing a turban. In the time of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, culture was that people used to wear a turban on their head. Okay, but there is no hadith in existence that says that wearing a turban is an ibadah. Okay, so should you follow that tradition of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And there the conditions are that yes, you can follow the tradition, provided you do not consider doing it an ibadah. That you do not wear a turban thinking that is an ibadah. If you do that, then that's a wrong thing to do. Okay? But if you want to look like Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam looked, if you want to do exactly what he did because you love Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam so much, then you can do those things, but with the intention that you want to look like Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, not because it was an ibadah, but you're doing it because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did it. So that also constitutes a sunnah, but it is 2 things are important, that you do as Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did, but the intention is not to do an ibadah, but intention is to do as Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did. Then that you will get rewarded for your expression of love to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So these things constitute the sunnah. It's very important for us to know what is an exact sunnah and how it should be followed, and what is an ibadah, how it should be followed, because as you know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said in Quran al-Majid to establish the prayers, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not spell out how you should stand, how you should bow down in ruku, how you should do sajda, and all these, how many rakat you should pray in different prayers. All these are coming from Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in authentic ahadith. It is reported. So we take those as ibadah and we perform those as ibadah. There are other things which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did, but did not say that those are ibadah, and those are sunnah for you to do it. But even if you do it, should not do it as part of considering it as an ibadah, because that will be doing in excess of what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us. He never said that it was an ibadah to carry a stick in your hand. He never said that wearing a turban is an ibadah. He never said that riding a camel is an ibadah. And so we should not be doing those things as an ibadah. But if you want to do it to express your love for Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that he did it, why don't I do it and see how I'd look? Then that's fine. That's perfectly fine. With that intention, it is fine, and you will be rewarded for your expression of love for Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. الحمد لله رب العالمين وقال الله تعالى في القرآن المجيد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما صليت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل سيدنا إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما باركت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل سيدنا إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. Dear brothers and respected sisters, in the place where we live and the country where we live, there are things that are going on which we need to be aware of, and we need to do what we can. There is an election coming up, primary election Tuesday. All those who are have the voting rights here in this country should take advantage of this opportunity to express your views on the through the ballot process. Although know that there is a lot of corruption going on, we should know that. We should know that the money is playing such a big role in these elections that individuals who are billionaires, they are virtually sponsoring individual candidates and forcing upon them agendas of their own personal agendas. We know that, but still the ballot box is your weapon, because there's no billionaire can come and force you to vote the way you want to vote it, right? But there will be definitely propaganda that are happening, and the elections are changing because of these things, and we should keep that in mind, and if we have any way of correcting the situation, we should correct the situation. And the other thing that has happened is, as you know, that an American soldier gunned down 16 civilians in Afghanistan. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on them and grant paradise to them, and give help to the families who are affected. And this part also, we need to understand that there is a tremendous lack of training, and appears there's a tremendous lack of training among the soldiers that go over there. You look at what atrocities happen at Abu Ghraib prison, the Quran burning incident, these mass killing incidents. All these things indicate there is a pattern that is happening. Of course, there are a lot more soldiers who do not commit these acts, but there are too many acts happening which point to the need for better training of our soldiers, so that they do not commit these type of atrocities. And unfortunately, sometimes we see that these soldiers even get away with from minimum sentences, and so it seems like the lives of people overseas are cheap in the eyes of our soldiers, or in the eyes of our policy makers, and that also should change. Once that changes, these things may not happen. So let's pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He grant us the wisdom to deal with these things. Allahumma a'izz al-Islam wal Muslimin. اللهم انصر من نصر دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وجعلنا منهم واخذل من خذل دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ولا تجعلنا منهم. عباد الله رحمكم الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون اذكروا الله يذكركم وادعوه يستجب لكم ولذكر الله تعالى أعلى وأكبر.